Good morning, everybody. I'm standing here below our house right now. Well, our place. We don't have a house built yet, but I'm standing here below our place and kind of on the bottom side of this hill over here. This is a hill that faces the north. I wanted to do a little talking today about riparian zones, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do with riparian zones and the benefits that you can get from it to actually feed your family in some really creative ways while getting the most out of those riparian zones. So the first thing is what is a riparian zone? So a riparian zone is a zone within a set of trees, within a creek, a creek or a river that actually hold that creek together. So like right in here, you can kind of tell it's a small creek. Now this is just a runoff creek from a pond, okay? But it's still a creek, all right? And we've got much larger creeks, like on lease properties and stuff, and we got creeks that could swallow 5 or 6 200 horsepower tractors, okay, easy. All right, so we've got some big creeks, but this is a good little place, and we don't have that creek on our land. We just have that on some of our lease properties. And riparian zones are very important because they help hold the ground together. So that water goes to flowing through there, and all of these roots that go in there hold it together. Now, I've done videos in the past how the trees on their own can actually become a positive and a negative, because the positive is the roots, the big, long, hard root structure will actually hold that ground together. But the tree canopy, if not maintained in a proper way, can actually shade out so much that you get washing just simply because you're killing off all of your smaller roots, because you need smaller roots and bigger roots together to create a strong net to help hold that ground together and keep all that topsoil from running downstream and end up in the ocean. So the best way is kind of like a net of grass, or in some cases a net of moss even. It just depends on where you're at. Moss or grass combined with big, large tree roots, that really hold that in together. But let's get back to the riparian zone. So the riparian zone, that's what it's there for. And you don't want to cut that away. Like when you clear a forest or something like that, you want to keep that bit of trees there. So this creek, actually, it runs down in here and ends up right there. And then there's another side here. This is a slightly larger creek. So this creek right here is actually running into this slightly larger creek here. This slightly larger creek is still just pond runoff, but it actually, if you look on the map, it is pond runoffs from several different ponds, whereas this one right here is only like one pond, okay? So whatever the case may be, they're all doing the same thing. They're all headed that way, and then they end up into an actual named creek down the road. But on my property, it's just a little small creek, okay? And it runs into a creek that's on my land, and that was the creek I was speaking about earlier. So riparian zones, you've got these places that are full of trees, and in some ways, some people see it as like especially grazers, they can see it as a little bit of a hassle, or a little bit of a waste of land, so to speak, because they don't quite know how to use it. And so some people actually talk about, planting fruit trees and productive trees and those things. And that's one of the things that I've talked about myself, is even planting productive trees. So take out a lot of these junk trees. So, the nature will actually fill voids however it has to. Okay, so it's going to put whatever trees it has to, and sometimes it will actually put in just whatever trees, any kind of thing to grow, whatever grows fast, in order to fill that void fast, okay? So it's not necessarily putting in highly productive trees. A lot of people think that means that we've always had low productive trees in our forests and things like that. That's actually not the case. A while back ago, we actually had a lot more things like hazelnut trees and things like that. Blight actually knocked a lot of those hazelnut trees out, and we're starting to grow some of those back, and they're like blight resistant trees and stuff. But we had a lot of those out in our forest, and we had different types of trees, and then some trees we've actually harvested a lot of the hardwoods and things like that. And fortunately, what includes hardwoods also includes nut woods and things like that, and they take longer to grow. But what would be nice is if we had more of those nut trees and things like that along our riparian zones, okay, along these spots that help hold this together. So imagine for a minute if we had trees that actually produced nuts, seeds, they actually produced all sorts of different fruits and foods of different cases. You know, you would get several things that would actually come from that. And for one, with your cattle, you would actually come in and graze your cattle near there. And I want to show this for just a second. I want you to notice what these cattle have done because of the way we graze. We actually mob graze. We don't just let them come in as they will. If you look on this other side, this other side of this creek right here, you actually see a big washout, and that's actually a cattle trail. And that was from cows being allowed to graze anywhere they want, anytime they want. So they would actually come into this riparian zone every day, and the whole time they were grazing this land right here. But we've started to do a system called mob grazing, and so that makes it to where that kind of thing doesn't happen. And I'm gonna get a little bit closer to where you can see this. This kind of thing does not happen as badly, okay? Spots that are like this, where cattle, they create a habit, a place where they come in every single day, and you're talking like 1 or 2 cows will come in here at a time. This right here, if I stand back, you can see this. This is what has happened after we started mob grazing. Mob grazing is a system that's very as close to nature as we can get it. This is a sloping. This is what happens when you get multiple cows, a lot of cows coming in all at one time, but then they go away. They're not there for very long. So they don't come in here and overpopulate this area. They put a lot of manure in here, but only for a little bit, and then they leave, okay? But they also will slope that creek, and that actually helps the creek to hold grass and things like that better in order to hold together. So when the water comes through here, it's got plant life on there to grow. So now that this has been trampled out, now it will start to grow plant life. And if you look real close, I don't know if you can see it, you can actually see the plant life starting to come back right after this has been grazed. You can see real small plants that are starting to come back. And those are going to take hold and do quite well. Whereas over here, where this is basically a 90-degree cut, if I come down in here, you see that right there, the grass is here, but there's no grass underneath. And that's right there where that drops off. It's not holding together, so the water will actually start to wash out. And a lot of people say, well, trees is what you have to hold that together. The trees is going to, you know, we need more trees, a lot of trees to save the planet. And I want you to look at this. This is an example of a place that wasn't sloped off. Okay, you see that? That's a tree that's been there holding on for dear life as the water comes in there and washes it out. Those are massive roots. That's about the best example you can give. And so that's been slowly washing that out until eventually this tree will come down. There's no question about it. It will come down. I've seen it so many times. This is not even coming from cattle, okay? This is just coming from there being no grass, no way to support that. You need small grass, small roots, and large roots together. You can't just have these large roots. You've got to have the large roots to hold the small roots, and then the small roots to keep the penetration from going through, but also to absorb that water and start to grow better plant life. So that's something that you're looking for. So you're looking for ground like this, sloped off. So that's why cattle is actually a wonderful thing for the planet. It's a necessary thing for the planet. Is we need cattle. We need things to do mob grazing, but they need to be grazed in a really good manner in order to achieve those types of things. But then in this riparian zone, imagine if we took it and we started growing fruit trees and nut trees and things like that. And those trees were highly productive. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about that, the fruit and the nut trees in the riparian zone. And you actually take those trees and you begin to harvest all of that, okay? Well, we've actually done a lot of studies on that. We've had a lot of different people do some studies on it. And I'm going to walk along our creek as I talk, because we have a decently long creek that comes right through the middle of our place. And this creek actually has, it takes up a good bit of our land. So if it's not productive, then we're taking up a lot of the land that we have to use for income and for our own food use. And that's one of the biggest reasons I've started thinking about this. So in the studies, the riparian zones are great if you plant fruits and nuts and all like that. The problem is being near the creeks and things like that makes it really difficult to produce crops and then actually start to harvest those crops. So it makes it, they're not straight lines, it's always curvy lines. You know, you never know for sure what the ground's going to be. It's just not conducive for really good, efficient harvesting, okay? What it can be good for is families feeding themselves and things like that, you know. But when you come to like a lot of harvesting and harvesting enough calories and enough food to really feed the world, you know, you've got to have these harvesters. Well, first of all, you're burning fuel, you know. You've got all this different fuel that's burning and things like that, all so that you can have this. But then it also becomes less productive, okay? It's slower, so now you're burning more fuel and more time and more energy to do this, okay? And so that's kind of the reason why we don't see a lot of that. Instead, we just see a bunch of grown-up trees and you know, the cows go in there a little at a time, and there's not a lot of, you're not feeding a lot of people. And so when you think about it, riparian zones are huge amounts of land that are not being used to help feed the world. They're not being used to help put food out on people's tables. And so there's a lot of potential there. There are a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of food that we could create. But how do you solve this problem of, you know, how do you solve this problem? Do we put more money into harvesters and invest more into these things? Or do we kind of go back to some of the old way of harvesting and let people go in there and hire people? And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? And that is a method you could do. But there are reasons that we got away from that. You know, one of the reasons why we have actually started to get so advanced in technology is because we've gotten away from manual labor to some degree. Now, us farmers, we're still not away from it. We still do a lot of manual labor, but not everyone can be a farmer. Not if we want to continue the technology that we have in the world. Not if we want people to be able to devote their lives and time. We want to have people that can devote their lives and time into figuring out and solving problems. So that's why guys like me will raise food and find the best and most productive way of raising food, so that other guys and girls, other people, will actually figure out how to solve these problems and do other things. And we've actually created a much better world because of that right there. We can actually, there's all these different people in their own fields learning different things, okay? So it's kind of like, you don't really want to take all of those minds away and put them out here harvesting peaches and harvesting nuts and things like that. We kind of like the ability to harvest better, to the more efficient way of harvesting stuff, so that we can keep other people doing other jobs that actually pay more too. So it allows everyone to make a little bit better income than they would if they were a peach harvester, okay? But also, it helps the farmer to make a little bit better income, even though they're having to put so much into that equipment and machines. They might be able to make a little bit better income, okay? So why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? And the biggest reason is still, you've got this problem of these bendy, windy creeks. I mean, this comes there, comes around, goes that way, and you don't want to straighten your creeks out. You know, your creeks are curved like that, partially because that's how nature bends it and curves it, you know, and cuts it out. It finds the best way to do it. But if you made a straight creek from here to the ocean, you'd never slow it down. It would never absorb into other places. And you would actually have a lot of, I mean, it would tear a lot of stuff out. It would probably kill a lot of wildlife because there'd be nothing to slow those things down. Even big rivers that are extremely wide, they still have curves in them. And that really helps to slow it down, but also to helps the landscape around it to absorb the water. So that's not something we want. Well, so the best things that a person can do with riparian zones. Imagine if we started to grow these trees and we started to put livestock underneath those trees that could harvest the food, okay? So right now we have like acorns, and we have, and livestock will eat acorns, but it's poisonous for them. Not for pigs, but it is poisonous for cattle, okay? So imagine if we had all these different nut trees and fruit trees and things like that. And sure, the farmer will come out and have some of their own food and harvest some of that. But rather than trying to stop everybody from, you know, being more productive and living higher quality, more productive lives, rather than stopping them from doing that, to come out here and spend hours to harvest this food, and rather than spending millions of dollars on equipment so that the equipment companies can make a lot of money, and rather than spending tons and tons of dollars on fuel, on the rising cost of fuel, and being faced with the fear of, okay, well, what if we eventually go to electric, and I've already invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this diesel machine, and now I'm being told I have to go to electric, okay? Rather than having all of that, what if instead we had animals harvest those calories that are there, instead of us harvesting them? And I'm sure, I mean, we harvest what's there for ourselves, and we eat some fruits and we eat some nuts, and we harvest that as the farmer, and then everyone, even in their own, you know, in town and things like that, can harvest some of those things for themselves and have some backyard trees and stuff. That's great. But what if we took those calories and we were putting them into animals? What if the animals, and we didn't harvest them, we didn't have the harvester, we just have these riparian zones that are now being productive, that are now being used in really good places. We're encouraging farmers to have more trees, okay? And now you're feeding these animals. These animals are harvesting it themselves. You don't have to do anything, okay? You just have the trees out there. Plus, you don't have to keep the trees. You don't have to put as much work into trimming or maintaining trees. When you have a harvesting system, you have to actually trim those trees pretty much annually to keep those trees controlled and in a perfect height, in a perfect situation to feed, to be harvested by harvesters. Okay, now there are other reasons for trimming, and I'm not saying that there isn't, okay? But all I'm saying is that actually slows down production. It slows down certain things, and it doesn't allow the tree to get as big as it could. And so by taking the animals and letting them harvest it, there's less that you have to worry about. I'm not saying that you won't have to do some, and I'm not saying you won't have mechanical means. I'm not against mechanical means in any way. I mean, I took my brush hog out here and I brush hogged all of this, okay? Because mechanical means and a mechanical advantage can be good, okay? But what if we're not married to it? What if we don't have to do those things? What if we're not forced to do it every single year, or we go broke if we don't do it, okay? So by planting all of these things, I just think that that's a wonderful way that we can feed a lot of different animals, and then we eat those animal proteins. We've been preached for so many years that animal proteins are bad, and that we shouldn't be eating as much animal products. We should be eating more fruits and more nuts and more vegetables and things like that. And you know, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not even going to pretend to be, and I'm not a nutritionist. However, I have actually studied for about 15 years in nutrition for animals and for people for quite a while. And as far as animal nutrition, I know quite a bit about animal nutrition, and I know a pretty good bit about my own nutrition. But I'm not even going to go into that. I'm going to let you research that for yourself or get to know that in other ways, okay? But what I want to say is I'm not downing vegetables or fruits or anything like that. I mean, we actually sell microgreens to our customers. You know, we sell garlic and things like that. So I'm not downing that. I think that's great, okay? But there's been this big thing that says that animal products are just all bad, and animals are killing the world. They're destroying the planet. And it's like, if animals are grazed in a better system, they're actually increasing the carbon. They're actually doing things that are better for the planet. They're actually literally fixing the problem faster than you can possibly fix the problem in any other way. And the best part is we're not forcing anyone to do anything. People are trying, there's a lot of people that are suggesting taking our freedom away in order to do this. Is that really the way to do it? Is that really the world that we want to live in, where our freedom has been stripped away from us? It's like, is life even worth living after that? You know, I think that there are better ways. And the sad thing is you suggest better ways like this to other people, and they're like, oh, well, it's too late. And it's like, really? Because it sounds like no matter what angle we approach it, it's still going to take some time, and it's not going to be perfect. Okay? But there's a lot of science to suggest that mob grazing and things like that can actually improve carbon and actually pull carbon from the atmosphere and put it back in the soil in a very fast and efficient way. Plus, you're actually helping these animals to be happier and healthier. Okay? You can't release these animals into the wild and expect them to be as happy and as healthy as they are on my farm. They're going to be way happier here. And part of the reason is for this. We live in a world with lots of people, okay? Way more people than we ever did. And I mean, you could say, well, let's just get rid of some of the people. Well, who's going to be the first to go? Who's going to volunteer? How do we choose that? That's a terrible suggestion. Why not figure out how to make things work better? Honestly, I believe with all of my heart that my animals are happier now than they ever were in the wild in history, ever. Even back when the country was mostly wilderness and woods and lots and lots and lots of prairie, which is pasture. Okay, lots of pasture. I'm gonna say that again. There was lots of pasture. A lot of people think it was all forest. It was not. And even in the forest, there was grass growing underneath, because the cattle would actually trample out a lot of that, and they would take away that underbrush, and there would be grass growing up through there. Okay, those are the kinds of things that we need to be looking towards if we're wanting to make stuff better, if we're wanting to improve the world. You know, the biggest problem why farmers haven't done these things is because all of the technology is being put into how to make more money from the equipment companies and from the fertilizer companies and from the fuel companies and even from the government. Okay, all of the technology is being put into those things rather than into how the farmer can actually make more income and how we can actually have better results for other people. And you know, one of the biggest reasons why I believe this, okay, one of the biggest reasons why the wealthy people do not want us to raise animals anymore is because animals is what gives us the most freedom. It gives us the most independence. Okay, when you take an animal that can turn this, a random junky plant, into actual super bioavailable calories and super good nutritious calories. Like, there's a lot of studies now that are proving that animal products are some of the most nutritious food on the planet, you know? And no one's talking about that. People aren't talking about how wonderful that is for our bodies to eat this. And I'm not talking about grain-fed cattle, although I think that grain-fed cattle are probably healthier than some of the garbage that other people are eating. I'm actually talking about lamb, pork, okay, grass-fed, grass-finished cattle. You know, all of those things put together actually create some really highly nutritious food. But the best part is if you can take an animal and you can harvest that animal to feed your family with, and that animal was able to harvest this stuff right here, take that and turn it into calories, wonderful calories. We would die if we ate this. If this is all we had to eat and we had nothing else to eat, we would end up dying. We would at least live very poor lives. And there's a lot of science to suggest that too. And I know that I'm going to get some people that are hating on me for that, okay? And I'm not telling anybody to change their diet. I think that every single person should eat in a way that makes them feel the best. We don't understand enough, even scientists will admit this, we don't understand enough about the human body. And it's possible we never will. But imagine if there are vitamins and minerals that we don't know about. I mean, it was only close to 100 years ago that we discovered other vitamins and minerals that we didn't even know existed before that. Who says that there aren't going to be a lot more vitamins and minerals that we don't know about? Okay, so you need to eat in a way that makes you feel better. You know, a lot of people claim that eating quality animal-based products actually makes them feel better. Okay, and I'm not trying to tell a person to go carnivore. You know, I'm saying that animals on the planet is something that's been on the planet for many, I mean, there's no telling how long. We don't really know, you know, but they've been here so long, and they've been a part of the planet, and it creates a perfect, healthy ecosystem. The worst thing you can do is get rid of all of them. You know, there are some groups, and I don't mean to knock on the vegans in any way, but I've personally talked to a lot of vegan individuals that have said, you know, you talk about, well, what is this utopia world that you're speaking of? How does it end up looking for the animals? And they're basically talking about a very, very small portion of animals that are left in the world. It's like, well, I thought we wanted it to be better for the animals. But it's actually not. They're actually talking about animals being the enemy, people being the enemy, and actually getting less animals. So it's like, okay, so you're wanting the animals to pay the price because you think that we have too many people on the earth, and it's like, well, I don't think that's good either. I don't think that's something we need to do. And no, they will not come out and say that. But if you really talk to them and get down to the brass tacks of it all, that is what it really comes down to. Okay? So I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that reducing the number of animals and getting rid of the animals. You know, there's this guy on YouTube, he's called Alan Savory. He's a person that I think everyone should watch. If you have any concerns about whether you do or not, I think everyone should watch it. It's very interesting to watch some of his thoughts and opinions. And I'm not saying to take it like gold, you know, take it for what it is. But it's very interesting just to watch it and listen to it. Might be worth watching, especially if you do think that animals, having more animals, is the enemy. Okay, I personally think that we need more animals, and I personally think that cattle and things like that actually used to eat a lot more. I think there was a lot more nut trees and a lot more fruit trees that grew in the wild, and these animals would eat from those trees. I think they did, you know. And you know, back to the forest subject, I touched on this in another video. There was a guy, I heard this in a seminar up in Missouri, I believe it was. They did this experiment, and I don't remember, I think it was the Forest Service that did this, but I don't remember for sure. But they did this experiment where they took one buck and they put him into a 100-acre lot, I believe. Now, I may be paraphrasing to some degree because I don't remember it exactly, but I pretty much remember the important stuff. So they put him into this 100-acre lot, okay? And they put him in there by himself and fenced him off to where no predators could get in and nothing else could get out. He couldn't get out, but there was, you know, he was in there by himself. And you could almost think of that as a utopia. I mean, it was a big forest, and it's what most, there's a lot of people that believe that animals are going to do better with a lot more forest, and that we're going to do better with, the world will thrive more with all forest, okay? So this buck was in there by himself, there's no competition, and there's no predators, okay? They ended up having to let this buck out because he nearly starved to death, okay? Bucks, deer, are a lot like sheep. They're browsers. They need a certain amount of grass, but they need a lot of this right here. They need things like this, small plants. They don't just need big, large, mature forests. They need underbrush. There needs to be sunlight, okay? Underbrush comes from a light that will actually go into the forest, okay? So you need that light to get down in there to create that underbrush, to create a lot of that, okay? Well, you need cattle to come in and break a lot of these things down. You need goats and sheep that go in and eat the outer underbrush. You need all of these things need to work in conjunction together to create a really good system and to actually create better food for all these different animals. I do think that there is certain amounts of management that can be done to actually increase the food for the wildlife. And that's one thing we work hard on our farm. We do a lot of different things. We see so many turkeys and so many deer on our place, so much more than we ever used to see, because of the way we graze. The way we do things have actually increased the wildlife. So it's like, well, now there's more wildlife. If they're here, if the wildlife are coming here, it's because there's more food. There is a better world for them, okay? So I'm not going to harp on this too long, and I know I've kind of let this video drag out a little bit, but you see the sunlight that's allowed to come in there. There's more food there. There's more stuff that's allowed to come in there. So imagine if you have that, and you have fruit and nut trees, and all of that is feeding animals, and the animals are harvesting the food. That way we don't have to build harvesters, we don't have to supply fuel, we don't have to have any of those types of things. We can just have animals, no fuel, no equipment, none of that. You're not married to any of it. Doesn't mean you don't use it from time to time, but you don't need it. You don't have to have it. That to me is the best, the closest to a utopia that we're going to get in our planet, because our planet is not a perfect world, and it will never be a perfect world. We're not ever going to see perfect here. But I do believe that we can create things that are better. So I just want y'all to think about that. Think about the world that we could have. And if you're a farmer, I want you to think about, riparian zones and places that have trees. Think about it differently. Think about planting some of those trees, putting some of those things out there. That's food. Worst case, it's a backup food for you, okay? It's food for you for if the world does start to get bad. We don't know what's going to happen in the world. We don't have any way of knowing, and I think at this point, all of us should know that we really don't know what's coming or what's going to be out there. So worst case, all of that food will be a great backup for you, okay? But I think it's just something that we should consider and think about, all right, as people. But then if you're a consumer, like let's say that you don't want to raise animals at all, okay, but you're trying to decide what is the best food that I can eat that's actually good for the planet and good for me. I want you to think about the things that I've said today. I want you to think about, is it better to eat a peach that had to be harvested from a harvester, that had to be maintained every single year? That tree had to be taken care of perfectly every single year, but also the place had to be fenced off to keep animals and wildlife out, okay? And it had to be mowed every year rather than being grazed. It's being mowed and more fuel being put into that. So is it better to eat that, and then you had to inject fertilizer because there's no animals and no other types of fertilizer, and the grass is being cut down to nothing constantly? So is it better to eat that, and then it was harvested and shipped to a warehouse using more fuel, and then shipped to a grocery store using more fuel, and then you buy it from there after it's been taxed and shipped and everything else, and then you finally get it home, you drive it again using more fuel or electric, whatever you have. But a lot of the electric companies are still using fuel, okay? So you're using all of this energy to get one peach, okay? Now imagine if a pig ate that peach, or if a chicken ate that peach, and no wildlife, you didn't keep the wildlife out, okay? The wildlife could actually get in there and get stronger and better, okay? And the chicken ate that peach and laid an egg because of it, or it was a meat bird and it actually grew meat because of it. Or imagine if a cow ate that peach, okay? Or whatever, whatever wanted that peach, whatever type of farm animal harvested that peach. So now these trees didn't necessarily have to be trimmed as often. They didn't have to be manicured or babied as often. You didn't have to put nearly as much fuel or income or time into this, okay? And so now you have a more affordable, super healthy animal that you can buy, and they've turned that peach into some of the most bioavailable nutrients that you can have, okay? And now you buy that directly from the farmer, all right? You're not buying it from a grocery store. You're not doing anything like that. You're buying it directly from a farmer. So when you buy it directly from that farmer, there was no fuel being used to ship this animal all over the place. You know, that the only thing we still have is that animal had to be shipped to a certified butcher. Okay? After that, you get it. You can buy it. You can take that animal to your home. Okay? Way less shipping, way less fuel being spent on shipping and moving stuff around. It's just a lot better system in my mind. So if you're just a consumer and that's where you're at in this, and you're trying to figure out what to do to make the world a better place, that might be something worth thinking about, worth considering as that consumer. Is if you can do that, think about how good that would be. Okay, so I think that's a really good place to strive. I think that's a really good place for all of us to try to get to. I think it's a world that could be really good for all of us. Okay, it could make things better for livestock, could make things better for farm animals, could make things better for the farmer, which is important. There's a lot of talk about farmers being the problem and all like that, and it's like, well, farmers are some of the poorest people ever. I mean, all throughout history, farmers have been poor. Okay, most farmers end up losing money or barely making anything. Okay, so don't blame the farmer, and don't, you know, there's a lot of farmers that do what they have to do. Okay, so is it better to do all of that, or is it better to, you know, plant these trees and have regenerative ranching? You know, I think it's worth looking at. I think regenerative ranching is something that's worth looking at, rather than making radical, huge decisions that completely change our world. You know, that's the answer that everyone's talking about. That's what they're talking about doing to change our world, is cutting out beef completely, cutting out meat completely. You know, going to lab meat that could potentially have, you know, it may not have nutrients that we haven't discovered yet. There may, you know, we may be getting nutrients from food that we don't know about yet, you know, that we may need, but we haven't discovered that nutrient yet. You know, there's a vast amount of knowledge in the human body that I don't think we may not ever understand. We definitely don't understand it all yet. I don't believe that we do, and that's why they call it practicing medicine. Okay? We don't fully understand. We do not fully know. Okay? So the closer to a natural system that we can be, the closer to a system that is the way animals used to roam. So it's like, to me, regenerative ranching is, we're trying to have it as close to nature as we can, but use those principles in nature and use our own knowledge to create better things. Okay, so nature wants to put that tree. Okay, go ahead and replace that tree with a productive tree. Leave a tree. Make sure you have a tree. Okay, but make it a productive tree. You know, use our knowledge, use science to help us. You know. But why make a radical difference and completely change everything and say, okay, we've just got to completely wipe out everything we know? You know, that's one of the biggest things that I see as sad in our world right now, is no one wants to even listen to the farmers. No one wants to hear the farmers plead, you know, or hear the knowledge. They want to act like that, oh, well, you're just poor, dumb farmers. And it's like, you don't know what kind of vast knowledge is there. You know, who else are you going to trust? And not to knock on the vegans again, but I've had so many vegans, you know, try to act like that they know more about animals and the health of an animal and the happiness of an animal than I do as a farmer. And then it's like, they don't even own a cat. Some of them, you know, some of them do. Some of them own a lot of animals, but it's like, really? How can you say, you know, I've studied animal health and animal well-being, and I've raised animals, many animals for so many years, and you're gonna actually think that my knowledge is worthless, that I have no value in the knowledge that I have? So, you know, I think we should be listening more to the farmers that we have, you know, and I think we should be listening to new ideas, you know. So Just think about that when you're getting ready to go to the grocery store and buy food, when you're getting ready to buy new things, or if you're a homesteader that's getting ready to build your own home. You know, consider ways that you can create more food for yourself, but not only more food for yourself, more ways of feeding livestock so that you can have more livestock on less acres. I think all of those things are worth considering. So as you go out, think about those things, move forward, and let's try to strive to build a better, more productive world that doesn't necessarily involve spending more money or becoming more in debt for farmers or using more fuel. Okay? I think that there are ways we can do this. So as always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share this video.